Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 548 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Go for No. Our quote of the day comes to us from Jim Rohn. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little extra. Before we jump into today's episode, I would like to thank everyone who has checked out our new apparel line. We have some really fun t-shirts and sweatshirts for both the Positivity Tribe as well as Team No Quit. We also have t-shirts and sweatshirts that go along with our new book, Process Before Results. We would really appreciate it if you would support us by heading on over to positivitytribemerch.com. Thank you. Today's episode is a first for us. We are interviewing the co-authors of the Go for No series, Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton, together. We've never had two guests on at the same time before, but I know you will enjoy today's episode. I'd like to welcome the dynamic duo of the book Go for No and Go for No, the sequel, to the podcast.
Hey, Christopher, it is so great to be with you.
Yeah, great. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having us.
I appreciate it. I know that you and I got the chance to interview many years ago, but Richard, it's our first time meeting, so I appreciate you guys being here. And you're actually the first interview I've done with two people at the same time. I've actually interviewed one and then the other for different things, but you're the first, so no pressure in regards to making sure we get this done right. So your book, Go for No, the sequel, is obviously a follow-up to your first book, Go for No. And first question I have to ask is, what led you to write the sequel so many years after the fact?
Well, that's an interesting question because we have to admit to having delayed fixing a problem or addressing a problem. When we first wrote Go for No, and we would go out and speak. People would come up and you say, "Oh, I love the concept. Increase your failure, you'll increase your success." And about 20% of the people in the audience would go do it. And companies would call us and they would say, "Wow, we got a huge increase from about 20% of our team. Thank you so much." And we kept hearing 20%, 20%. And I kept thinking, well, what about the other 80%? And when we did some digging, what we found out is there are two clearly defined groups of people. One, people who understand the concept and can apply it, and people who understand the concept but can't apply it. And they can't apply it because they have emotional hangups. They have a bad relationship with the word no. They believe that it's personal. They believe that it reflects on them. They believe that if they get on the phone and somebody gets angry or says, I don't want to take this call right now, or they hang up on them, that they have somehow done something wrong. Right? Not that it's the receiving end, it's them. And as a result, they just stop. Or many of them just, go, "Hey, that's a great concept, but I can't do it." And we got to thinking about that. And what I said, it was a little embarrassing here because, we knew this about 10 years in. At 10 years in, it was very obvious. So we said, well, we're going to have to address this eventually. And so anyway, 15 years after that, we finally decided to write the sequel. Now, it's not that we didn't address it at all. We did that in our workshops, but we decided to write the sequel because the sequel really is about digging deeper into somebody who hates sales, who believes that sales is sleazy, who thinks that they are manipulating people, who believes that there has to be a winner and a loser. They can't imagine a win-win situation. That it's always at every call is a manipulation. And we said, okay, let's address that in particular, and let's write the sequel using our main character from 25 years ago, Eric Bratton, and now he has a 20-year-old daughter who's suffering from those issues. And that's kind of where the idea for the sequel came about.
And that was always the challenge, Chris, because we, from a story standpoint, because Go for No, the first one was a fable, we knew that the sequel needed to be a fable, but we had to have, like, we didn't just want to do like Eric 2.0, like here he is again. He doesn't want to fail. He doesn't want to hear no. And we just kind of recycle all the old ideas. So the fact that we waited an entire generation and now got to see it from his daughter's standpoint, and I think it's kind of cool, like just to get a female involved and just to get kind of different energy. So that was another fun aspect of it.
Yep.
I think you did a phenomenal job with that, I guess, second generation. But for me, I think what you said, Richard, is really important because the concept of going for no, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think being in the sales world myself, we're all, I guess, in the sales world in some way, shape, or form. But I think when somebody hears that, go for no concept, it kind of has that flip where you say, okay, I want to get no's. And I think that's such a misconception. But the parallel I put forth is I do a lot of work in sports with coaches and teams, and no team or coach or player wants to lose. Nobody goes out to say, okay, I really want to fail so I can learn, or I hope we get, our butts handed to us so I can then make a list of 5 things to learn. But it's the reality of life. And I think I posted this on social media a couple months ago. Nobody goes through life undefeated. But if you look at the most quote unquote successful people in all walks of life, they've learned from those no's, those failures, those business opportunities that maybe didn't go their way. And I just love how you weave it into your stories, plural. But I guess the question I have for you guys is why do you think it's a mindset shift or block where some people just are not able to really embrace those no's and failures because they know at the end of the day that that's how they get better? But I think sometimes people just have that fixation where it's like, that's a reflection on me and I'm a failure or I lose, as opposed to how can I learn from this?
Yeah, it's entirely a mindset thing. And Rich used the word emotional hang up, which it is certainly emotions are involved, like 100%. And so it's a combination, I guess, of your interpretation of no, what that means for you, and so your emotional reaction and mindset too. And so one of the things that we do in the book is we have Cassidy, our secondary main character, kind of go through what she considers to be her main self-imposed limitations, because we figured if we could pull those out of her, the reader would probably identify with almost all of them. And so I think that is the issue. And I'll tell you, like, I do these Go for No challenges, 21-day Go for No challenge, get people together. They're entrepreneurs, they're independent business owners, salespeople. And I tell them all the time. And basically the goal is, okay, we kind of all coach each other. We meet weekly. And the goal is go out, get as many no's as you can, practice the strategies. What are the challenges? What are the obstacles? And I tell them, you're not trying to get a gold star here. Don't come back to me with, here's I got an A. I went out and I did it and I got yeses and it was all perfect. I said, come back with a story of how you fell on your face, of how you failed and what went wrong. And it's terrifying for people. They don't want to do it. And I keep telling them, this is the easiest assignment in the world. Just go out and fail, but they can't do it.
Yeah, the big issue with sales training in the world, as we have come to know it, is that and we think of this as, I guess we'll call it a sales burger. Okay, bun, meat, bun. Almost all sales training is geared around the meat. The meat is the meat of the process. It's how do you connect with somebody, right? How do you get past the gatekeeper? Asking open-ended questions, presenting the product, overcoming objections, asking for the referral. These are all meat issues. It's the meat of the system. And some companies have 5 steps, some have 7, some have 13. Doesn't matter. That's the meat of sales training. On the top, the bun on top is mindset. If you think of it as top of mind, right? A top of mind is a mental shift, as Andrea said, where instead of saying every time I hear the word no, that's bad and I'm doing something wrong, the mindset shift is I need to increase the number of no's I hear. And every time I hear the word no, that's good and I'm doing something right. So that is the mindset shift. What it took us so long to realize is that the bottom bun, the underlying part of the hamburger, that it's the foundation of the burger, is a feeling of worthiness. It's self-esteem. It's I can't tell you how many people have said to us, I just don't know that I deserve to succeed. And it's like, wow, where did that come from? Well, if you don't think you deserve to succeed, there's a very funny scene in the movie Wayne's World where Wayne and Garth get down on their hands and knees and they're going, "We're not worthy. We're not worthy." And everybody laughs because it's such a funny line. Well, that's not funny. There is nothing funny about going through life thinking that you're not worthy. And so where does this sense of unworthiness start? And obviously, it starts when you're young. It starts from, messages from your parents or other family members or school teachers or the church or wherever it happens to come from. You get this sense that you're not good enough and somehow not deserving. And so that's what we say, there's really these three parts to the process. And we addressed the top bun in Go for No. We basically said no is good. But we never addressed the bottom, which is, no is good. And that's a strategy. But you're good. You are also good. You are somebody who deserves, all the good things that life has to offer. And so we're trying to make that all come together. Also, the thing that we laugh about is, people say, "How long did it take you to write the book Go for No?" Because 17 days. I'll be honest with you. I just channeled it. 17 days. How long did it take you to write the sequel? 25 years. Okay. Because for a long, long time, even we didn't recognize what the underlying problem was for a lot of people.
I think that's so powerful. And as I was listening to you talk about the sales process, I just, by default, it puts me into almost every sales arena I've ever been in. And I think so many sales jobs, roles, whether it's managers, companies, leaders, they teach that, to use your frame of reference, that meat, but the bottom and the top are just as important, if not more important. And I don't want to demean somebody's product or service that they're selling, but I think having been in sales for over 20 years now, it's so much more than handling objections. And it's so much more than, well, this does this and this does that, because that's just a small portion of it. But I think every sales system or process I've been taught focuses like 95% just on objections. And they have those books where like, oh, if the potential client or prospect says this, flip to page 12, and that's all fine and good. But as we all know, not a single sales call ever goes exactly how a sales presenter or coach or manager says it's going to go. There's a question that's not in that booklet. There's a objection or there's another comment, but it comes down to me, I think, so much of those top two buns, which leads me to a question that I'm really curious to ask. Is early in the book, you guys wrote something that says, "Choose your future or it will choose you." And I want you guys to expand on that, because I want to be clear. It's such a short and simple concept as far as the number of words, but I think there's so much to it that goes into what we just talked about.
Well, one of the books that recently inspired us, and he actually wrote the foreword to the sequel, is a book by a guy named Benjamin Hardy, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who wrote the book he's written a lot of books, but he wrote a great book called Be Your Future Self. And so one of the things that Richard and I have become kind of obsessed with in helping people deal with the mental challenges of going for no is it's becoming your future self. And what is that? And so this idea of the future you was a theme in Go for No as well, because of course, what happens in that book is Eric, our main character, goes to bed one night wakes up in a house that belongs to a wildly successful future version of him. And the whole premise of that book is, well, how did future me get so successful? Because current me is kind of mediocre. And the secret, of course, was going for no. And so now here we are with Cassidy, and we challenge her, and we give her a slightly different answer. It is go for no, but it's also becoming someone who can, and developing, and we don't go deep into it, but it's developing the alter ego, if you will, the mindset that I can't do this now, but the other me could. And if I can live into that, if I can do the things, then I will create that future person by just kind of almost turning myself into it.
Yeah, exactly. And this idea of alternate versions of yourself, there's no doubt in my mind that virtually anybody can select to be the alternate version of themselves, or to be an alternate version, because there's an unlimited number of alternate versions. And in the book, as we get towards the very end, it's kind of the big summary of what Go for No, the sequel, is about. Is Cassidy has this moment in the middle of the book where she says, "I can't do this, Dad. I just can't do this." And he says, "Well, then don't be you." And I first heard that as a concept probably 15 years ago. I read it in a book, and it was about a coach who had a client came in, and the client said, "Oh, I could never get up in front of 1,000 people and speak and give a speech." He said, "Well, then don't be you." And when I read that, I had two thoughts that simultaneously crossed my mind. The first one was, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What do you mean, don't be you? You are you. What do you mean, don't be you? And the second thought I had was, that is the most profound thing I have ever heard. The idea that you don't have to be you. And if you think about it, this whole idea of be your authentic self. You're fine just the way you are. I could never get up in front of an audience of 1,000 people. And what does somebody tell you? It's okay. Just be yourself. No, that person can't do it. You want to be someone else. You want to be someone who can. You want to adopt an alter ego, as Andrea said. It doesn't matter whether your alter ego is, you picture yourself as James Bond, right? If you want to be, more influential and more confident.
Kobe and the Black
Mamba. Yeah, I mean, Kobe Bryant picked as his alter ego, the Black Mamba, right? Who had this amazing work ethic. David Goggins, who wrote a fantastic book, he created the alter ego Goggins, not David Goggins, but Goggins. He said, in the morning when the alarm goes off, David Goggins wants to sleep in. Goggins will have no part of it. Okay, Goggins doesn't sleep in. David wants to drop out of the race. Goggins won't quit. And so you can choose to be an alternate version of yourself, and to be somebody who would just start saying, I can do this, as simple as that sounds. But then to really start living and defining what your alter ego looks like. How do they dress? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they carry themselves when they enter a room? All of those things. Then how do they behave in a sale? How do they behave when they get an objection? Not what's the answer to the objection. It's how do they behave? How do they carry themselves? How confident are they? And you start becoming that person, then there's some real magic that can happen.
I love, first of all, both of those analogies. I was and still am a big Kobe fan, and I respect and admire David Goggins for many things. But I want to touch on one thing that you said, because I think this is where the famous book, The Secret, I think missed for some people. It's the think about it vision, picture yourself driving that car. And then it was almost, in my opinion, that drive off the cliff, because I think what some people didn't correlate those two ideas of think it, visualize it, is then I have to do it. And to your point, David Goggins wants to stay in bed. David Goggins wants to put on TV and, just hang out and relax. Goggins puts his running shoes on and curses himself under his breath and goes out and runs for, 4 hours nonstop. Same thing with Kobe, right? Kobe was coming off of a road trip, and, he's tired, and Kobe wants to stay at home with his kids or just relax and recover. But the Black Mama gets up 3 hours before practice and then works out. And I think that's the difference is the first part for me is the mindset. You have to believe that you're capable of more, becoming that person. But then that very next step is, what are you going to do or not do? And I think a lot of people miss that action perspective, because the thinking is the easier part. The action is the hard part. I think they're both difficult to change your mindset, but I think it's easier, just my opinion. I'd love to get your perspective. It's easier, I feel, to think something, a different mindset, a different belief, than it is to go ahead and say, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put this different belief or mindset into action.
Yeah, well, I will say this. We had a really nice conversation with Jack Canfield about this once, and um, the kind of the conversation went in the direction of the idea that the law of attraction ends with the word action, right? It's the law of attraction, of action. And I think this idea, when you say The Secret kind of did a little bit of a disservice, and I think they did, the suggestion that if you keep thinking about the Lamborghini, you're going to wake up one morning and the Lambo is going to be in your driveway. It suggests that you can pull the thing to you. The reality is, if you think enough about the Lamborghini, then your brain starts saying, he apparently wants this Lamborghini. We're going to have to figure out a way to get it. What should we do? What action should we take? The Lamborghini does not come to you. You go to the Lamborghini. But it starts with thinking about it. It starts with believing, right, that you can accomplish something. But in the end, it's always going to be action on the. And now, listen, we're big believers that the universe is all knowing and that there's karma. And I'm not suggesting that your thoughts don't influence things. Of course they do. But when you get practical and you get down to it, it usually comes down to saying, okay, I want something very badly. And then your subconscious goes about solving the problem. And if you get the solution and you put the solution in action, then the stuff manifests.
I have to tell kind of a funny story too. So one of the things that I've wanted to do for years is do a better job of making videos to put out on the internet, on social media. And we lived in a downtown high rise here in Orlando for years. And so my excuse for not doing it was always, we had horrible acoustics. You just could not record. We had cement walls and wood floors, and it was just impossible. So we moved into our house 3 years ago, and it was like, I had carpeting, I had quiet rooms, but I have to tell you, it still wasn't perfect. I had a lot of excuses to why it just still wouldn't work. And then, Christopher, we built a studio. We had a studio built in October. And still, was it perfect then? No, I had all kinds of issues and reasons. And then finally, this is why we are big fans of coaching. Finally, I hired a guy who was like, I'm going to give you the scripts and you're going to go in and do the videos. And even that, he was like, you're going to do this in January. That's when we're going to start. And I went the entire month of January not doing it. And I wrote him and I'm like, I have a bunch of stuff popping up. I'm trying to work on it, this and that. I don't think I'm very good. And he's like, Andrea, I know, just read the script, just do it. And I finally did it. And it took all of these excuses and all of these perceived obstacles. And I finally got to where I had no obstacle left. I had, beat down every obstacle. And so the only thing that was left was to do the action. But I think about what was the real issue? Was it the technology? Was it the room? Was it the acoustics? No, the reality was it was my mindset the entire time. And I think that's what it is for most people. And that's certainly what it is for Go For Now.
First of all, I appreciate both of you touching on what you shared. I think what you said is just so powerful. And it goes back to something that I talk about with my clients is there's always going to be at least one, if not multiple excuses that you can make. Now, whether you or myself would agree with them, that's a difference of opinion, but there's always an excuse, right? The microphone is not the newest version. The room is not perfect. The lighting is not, but it goes back to Gary V, who is somebody that I really respect. And I did myself, I took a deep dive into the wine library early on in his career. And I did that because I wanted to know a little bit more about him, and I'm nobody to judge anybody, especially Gary Vee, but compared to who he is today and how he speaks and the presence on stage versus some of those videos I watched, they were literally like on a scale of 1 to 10, they were like a -2 versus a 10 now. And I don't think he would be offended by that. But the reason I share that story is because that's what success and mindset and going for no and everything is about. It's nobody starts today being great. And the challenge I have with social media, and I think you guys would both agree, is everybody puts their edited videos, their filtered pictures. They take 6 pictures and then they find the best one and then they edit it and they put it out there. And people are comparing their first shot of the morning versus somebody that spent like 3 hours, and they're like, well, how come mine's not that good? And you're like, well, because you didn't spend 3 hours editing it. And I think if you compare yourself today on day 1 or day 2 to somebody's, year 5, you're never going to be to the same level. But I think so many people just put those excuses, and it's well, you have one excuse and a second and third, all of a sudden you have 15. It's really easy to say, you know what, I'll do it another day.
Yeah, I agree. And, part of our philosophy is before you can be great, you've got to be good. And before you're good, you've got to be bad. And before you're bad, you're going to suck. And in order to suck, you've got to start. I mean, it is a process, and nobody starts. We didn't start. Could we have even imagined the business we would have built or the people we would have become when we started? I mean, we didn't have any idea. We could see the first step. First step was write the book. The next step was tell people about the book. And then beyond that, we didn't know, what in the heck was going to happen. But you have to start. You just have to start.
I think one of my coaches, and I'm glad you guys said that you have coaches, because I think some of the most successful people in so many different fields, when you talk about coaches or mentors, people call them different things, masterminds. It almost opens up a panacea where people say, oh, well, I had this coach and that coach, and success leaves clues. But one of my coaches, a gentleman by the name of Brian Kane, who I think is one of, if not the best in the mental performance space, he always says it's the start that stops most people. And he's been on my podcast, I think 3, if not 4 times. He's by far the number one person. But I challenged him, I think, on the second to last episode. And I said, Brian, I want to challenge you because I think it's easier to start something than it is to continue something. And I said, for example, you start a workout routine or healthy eating. That first meal is really easy. You make your egg whites and your whole wheat toast and you're like, okay, this is easy. But then it's that second or third day when you're at work and it's somebody's birthday and they bring in a giant cake. It's not easy to say no. And he said something really interesting to me. He said, Chris, but you have to start again every single day. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's so powerful when you have these conversations with other people that are like-minded, that see things or think of things a little bit differently. And it really got me thinking is every day or every afternoon or every week, whatever that objective or goal is, you have to, in essence, restart again. And I think there's so many fun things. But Richard, the one thing that you mentioned, to go back for a second, I had never heard of the law of attraction ends with action. And, for me, I love catchy things and I love the way people say things. But as you said that, I wrote it down and I was just like, yep. I was like, he's right. But I think that's where, to your point about the law of attraction, and I'm a big believer in affirmations and visualizing things, but I think to take it to the next step and that next level is when you take an actual experience and you tie it to that action. For example, I work with a lot of college sports teams and athletes, and we will go through some visualization techniques, some mindset, but then when we do our work throughout the season, I have them discuss actual things that happened. So yes, it's important to predict what things could happen. It's important to prepare for things. But then when they do happen, good, bad, or indifferent, when you're able to then go back and say, okay, here's how we handled that really well. Here's how we didn't. Here's what we could do in the next time. Or if we did it really well, how do we replicate and duplicate that? But I just loved how you said the law of attraction ends with action.
Right. And we give Jack Canfield the credit for that. He's the one who turned us on to it. So.
Yeah.
I'm gonna edit everything and put my name and words in there and give myself the credit. No, I want to touch on I want to touch on what you just said because it's really important in this, let's call it, personal development space. There are so many people that are doing amazing things, but we all learn and grow from each other. And I think there's a lot of people out there today that are putting out some of their things as, this is my stuff and, I created this and I did all of this. And I don't want to be critical, but I always want to challenge those people because I always want to say, okay, so you've never read a book, you've never listened to a podcast, you've never, gone on YouTube. And I don't mean to, but I think so many people that are successful are the ones that take those ideas and concepts that they've learned from other people and they put their spin on it. And I don't want to use you guys as an example, but I do because I love the concept of going for no, because it's not about failing. It's not about wanting to fail. It's not about hoping to fail. It's about that concept. And I think you guys did a fantastic job in the first book setting everything up. And then I think the second book, the sequel, really tied everything to the whole concept of persistence and your mindset. And you have to believe, you can do something. And wanted to ask you guys a question. When it comes to mindset, people talk about, you have to do the action and succeed before you believe. And then there's the other side of the coin where people say, you have to believe you can accomplish it before you then go ahead and take the action. So I wanted to get your guys' spin on that because there is both sides of the coin.
Yeah. Wayne Dyer, I read his book probably 20 years ago, where the title of the book is Believing is Seeing. And I remember thinking about, I thought, no, you see it and then you believe it. No, he's saying, no, if you believe it, then you see it. And that's the first time that I was introduced to the idea that you can look at this in two different ways. And I think they're both valid. I think both parts of it are important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have always been, especially from a training standpoint, we have always been behavior first. Your thoughts about something change on the back end. One of the things we used to do is we would do a management workshop, and we would give people these 4 different cards, and they would have to arrange these 4 different cards in terms of how they felt that these things would motivate people. And one of the cards had the word behavior on it. And then the other one of the other cards had like celebrate on it. And we had them arrange
attitude
and where attitude fell in this. So it was one of these things where it was like, from a management perspective, do you go to somebody and try to change their attitude about it and then hope that they'll finally do it? Or do you kind of force them into doing something and then their attitude changes on the back end? Well, we have always been in that camp, which is you do something and your attitude changes on the back end. So like, for example, you hear people, you were just talking about this, eating well, and you hear the like keto diet or this diet. Well, those diets they're not super fun, but what happens is when you force yourself to do it and you do it for a few days, and then you look in the mirror and you go like, holy cow, I've lost 4 pounds. Your attitude changes on the back end and you go like, I get it. This diet works. I'm on board. But beforehand, you're like, I don't believe this is it works for other people. It's probably not going to work for me. I can't stick with anything. So for me, these things are always, just do it, shut up about it, don't complain, don't put any judgments, and your attitude will change on the back end. But Christopher, I also do want to mention something that you brought up, and then we can go back to Richard's take on this. But I love that you said that we're not about, it's funny, we say want to fail, but we say want to fail not because we want you to specifically go out and fail in that you don't give it your best, that you don't put your all into it, or that you are hoping that you fail. We want people to be willing to fail because we know that's the path to success. And the people that don't want to are the ones that say no to themselves and they hold themselves back. And so one of the things that we always say is you don't have to wish or hope or pray to get a no. You don't have to expect a no. Like, I think expecting to fail. I think if you expect to fail, you will, whether you're playing sports and you run out on the court, you are going to miss shots. If you expect that you're going to lose the sale, I think you're going to 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose the sale, but you have to accept it. You have to accept that it is part of the process. You said in the very beginning of the show, it's stupid to not go into things accepting that there's defeat. You are going to be defeated at some point. And so that's the big difference for us when it comes to the mindset of failure is acceptance versus expectance.
I love that. For the book and what you guys do, to me, I look at failure as, and everybody always says, obviously, like, you're not a failure, unless you lose, and just accept it and don't learn anything. And that's so much easier said than done. As we're recording this, the men's and women's NCAA basketball tournament just finished, and there were, I don't know how many losers in all the games, and none of those teams or coaches or players were like, "Oh, this is great. I'm so glad we lost. Now I'm even more excited for next year." It's the exact opposite. There's tears. Some people are never playing again because their eligibility is over. But the concept that I think is so powerful in your book, and I think most people miss it when you hear that go for no concept, is, to your point, you're not expecting and you're not starting a sales call or the game saying like, "Oh, I hope we lose today so I can learn." You still want to win. You still probably hope or expect to win. But then whether that sale is lost, that game is lost, then you have a choice. And it goes back to, I think, the mindset is, take a couple minutes, depending on how big the game or sale is, maybe, more than a couple minutes to really kind of, take some time to grasp what happened. But then you have that choice. Am I going to learn and get better? Or am I going to then just go on to the next, game or sale? And I think a lot of people do that, meaning just move on and go, versus those that say, okay, how do I reflect on this so I can be better next time? And I think that's the perspective that a lot of people don't fully embrace, because if you just go from no to no to no, or loss to loss to loss without really reflecting, you're not going to get any better. And at the end of the week or month, you'll be like, "Oh, I got 4,000, no's." And like my next question would be, "Well, did you get any yeses?" Be like, "Oh no, I wasn't caring about yeses." But I'd say, okay, well, that's not really what the concept is. It's not go for no, only no's and never yes, or always lose. No one starts a basketball season or baseball season and says, "Hey, let's go defeated all season." They do the opposite and say, "Okay, we have, 12 games in our college football season. Let's go 12-0. No one does the opposite and say, "Hey, I challenge each and every one of us to fully embrace, let's go 0-12.
Yeah, and obviously when we get people who say like, "Oh, in your book you said the third step is the wantingness to fail." We say the first step is, right, the willingness to hear the word no, the willingness to fail. Oh, excuse me, the ability is the first step, the ability, and then the willingness. I'm willing to do it. I don't really like do it, but I guess I'm willing if that's what it takes to be successful. And then you have this step called the wantingness. And wantingness is where it throws everybody. Everybody gets confused when we say the wantingness. It doesn't mean that you want, to have every call you ever make or every game you ever play end up in failure. So I'll just give you a perfect example. We had a friend in Portland, Oregon, and he said, he calls us and he goes, "You're not going to believe this." He goes, "I had set a goal for getting 10 no's for the day. And it was 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had 9 no's." And he said, "And I was so frustrated because I didn't get to my no goal. I wanted that 10th no." He goes, "And then I remembered this guy I'd called on repeatedly, and he said no to me every time I called him. I thought, easiest no in the world." So I dialed the phone. I get him on the phone. "Hey, listen, Tom, it's Mike, and he goes, "Gosh, Mike, I'm glad you called. We're ready to go forward." And he says, and I ended up getting the yes. And he goes, "I hung up the phone." He goes, "And I wasn't quite sure how to feel about it. right? He was going for no, but he got the yes. Of course, the yes is the destination, is what we all want. But no is how you get there. My dad used to go on sales calls. He would go on sales calls, and the client would say, "Okay, great. We'll take 15 cars, right?" And my dad could just write up the order and leave, but he didn't like ending on yes. So he would say, "Well, listen, let me ask you a question. While I've got you here, I'd love to get 2 or 3 referrals. Do you have any referrals you'll give me?" He goes, "Yeah, I got 3 guys in my Rolodex I can give you." And then he pulls out 3 things, and then my dad he just got another yes. So now he's frustrated again. He doesn't want to leave on yes. He goes, "Hey, listen, while you got the Rolodex out, what if we just gave it to Mary up front and had her take it over to the copy machine, and she could just run copies of the entire Rolodex, and I can just go with that." And the customer, the prospect go like, "Hey, don't push it." So my dad finally got his no, and he was happy. So there's like no, 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 yes, but there's also yes, 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 and then still wanting to get a no on the back end of it.
I love that, and I think it to me, I as you share that, I listen and I realize that if you're doing the work, if you're learning and you're growing, unless you're just incompetent in that area, and obviously there are some people, you are going to get yeses because that's part of the process. And I think, not to beat a dead horse in the sense, but I just love the simplicity as well as the complexity of the concept of go for no, because to me it's identical to, as we said, the book The Secret, right? Because the part of the process is, see it, visualize it, it's embracing those things, but then it's the action. And the same thing with go for no is, you don't want that no, but it's when you do the work, you put in the work, you get to that next step, and you've learned and grown so much along the way because you are not taking it personal. I think that's one of the things that you both touched on early in the interview. It's really hard, especially for a new salesperson, not to personalize a no, right? And the reality is, going back to I think my first or second comment is, nobody finishes whatever their career is or their life undefeated. Look at, for example, Tom Brady, one of, if not the greatest athletes of all time. He did not finish his career 200-0 and won every Super Bowl and won every game. It's the opposite. He succeeded more than he didn't, but he also lost a lot of games. But he always was able to learn and grow and change what did not work, replicate what did work. I want to change lanes here for a second, because we could talk for hours, and I want to respect both of your times. But I wanted to kind of have a fun ending to this interview. For somebody who maybe is on the fence with the go for no concept, is there a parting words you guys could leave where somebody could maybe embrace it, or in some ways re-embrace the idea and take their sales or personal life to the next level? Because I think what your book does touch on is, it's not just about sales. Yes, it is, and obviously in the book, but to me, the similarities in life are endless.
Yeah, one of the themes in the book, and as you just said, we really want this book to be for salespeople, but anybody who has a goal or dream. And one of those themes, we talked a lot about be somebody who can and all of that, is just the idea of taking a shot at stuff. And that's what Cassidy does in the end, not to give away the plot or anything, but she does something a little crazy. And so I think that is something that we encourage people to do. Is, you've got one life, you this is it. This is not a dress rehearsal. So if there's something that you want to achieve, look for those opportunities and then take the shot. Don't say no to yourself. And so we have this scene where um this, what we call a go for no moment, where Cassidy has this opportunity to decide, do I do this thing? Do I talk to this person, or do I just talk myself out of it? And I think so often people just talk themselves out of it. They make those excuses, like in my example with doing videos, and you come up with all the excuses and all the reasons. And so if there's somebody listening to this where there's that thing, you got to stop talking yourself out of it. You got to seize the moment and just do the thing.
I love that. I appreciate that. Richard, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm going to probably screw up this story, but I think I can get the general
That's
concept.
not the way to
I know it's not the way you start, but I don't remember the exact quote. But a student goes to his Zen master and says, "Master, I want to enjoy my life." And the master says, "Well, then you should learn to enjoy failure." And the student says, "Well, no, I enjoy success, but I don't enjoy failure." He goes, "Well, then you will enjoy 1/3 of your life." This idea, and if you think about it, what's the number we always talk about salespeople? In most professions, like 30% is about the average closing rate. Now, in some different industries, it's much higher or much lower, but we always talk about 30 going 10 insurance sales calls, and you'll close 3 sales, and you'll get 7 no's.
Batting 300.
Yeah, batting 300 in sports is a great example. And you think about it, that if you've made the decision to enjoy yes, but not to enjoy no, and if you think about when you die, statistically, if you keep at it, the last thing you're going to do is fail. The last thing you have a 70% chance that the very last thing you try is going to be a failure. So you have to get good with that. I mean, who wants to go out on a bad note? So if you can learn to enjoy failure, then all of life becomes so much easier. But it's when you spend all your time trying to avoid failing that everything becomes hard.
Well, I will say this. I asked a question and I got 2 very different but awesome answers. And for our listeners out there, I am going to recommend 2 books for you. Go for No and Go for No, the sequel. And I just want to thank both of you for being on here. And I hope that we can connect again soon. But thank you both for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to episode number 548. I'm glad that both Andrea and Richard were able to join us for this episode. I really enjoyed speaking with them, and I'm confident that you were able to take a few things away from today's episode. We ended our show with great advice. Take your shot. I would like to echo that same idea to our listeners. Take your shot. To quote the fantastic and famous hockey player Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I hope you take your shot today. And remember, believe, and act upon our motto. We rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.